welcome to Real Estate Pulse with Medalist Legal. I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick MacQueen, founder and attorney with Medalist Legal, and Medalist Legal partner and attorney Brandon Bodea. Guys, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Patrick, first, I got to start. Lots happened since we saw each other last. Tell us about the new firm and what your focus is.
Yeah, no, we're still 100% a real estate law firm. We handle real estate transactional matters, real estate litigation. So anything that touches real estate, chances are we've done it or we can do it. And so we're gonna stay with that sort of core value and that sort of core function area and practice area. The goal of Medalist, though, is to actually be a little bit smaller, and we want to make sure that we're providing excellent customer service and client interactions. And so we're trying to create a little bit more of an exclusive law firm where we only have a maximum amount of clients at any one time, so that our existing clients, can feel good that they're getting our full attention.
Now, do you handle both residential and commercial real estate?
We do. Yep, we totally do. And I would say it's probably a pretty good split right now between residential and commercial. So it's a good mix. It keeps us nice and busy and keeps us on our toes.
Brandon, tell us a little bit about what your focus is, what the focus of your practice is primarily.
Yeah, so I actually get a good, healthy amount of both transactional and litigation work. I'm probably a little bit more on the litigation side of things. But recently I've really seen my practice kind of expanding more into the construction law area, focusing a lot on easement law, landlord-tenant disputes, and things of that nature. I started working with Patrick probably about 6 or 7 years ago. He plucked me right out of law school, and he's really exposed me to a lot of real estate stuff.
It's a good time to be in it. It seems like every single corner we pass, there's a new construction project going on. I live out in the West Valley, and there's these massive, like 2 million square foot projects going on. So I'm sure you guys are keeping busy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a ton of stuff, and specifically, there's about a 17-mile stretch on the west side near the Arizona Loop 303 freeway between the I-10 and the US 60, where we're seeing massive development of warehouse space, and that's attracting a lot of retail space, other businesses coming to Arizona. So we've seen a ton of influx of transactional and commercial work.
Right, and then it seems like the residential is kind of following that. We just had that huge new project that broke ground in the West Valley that someday is going to have 100,000 homes. So have a lot to talk with you guys about. So Patrick, heading into 2023, I want to talk a little bit about the trends that people should be watching. So what are the trends you're seeing in regards to drafting and negotiating commercial lease agreements heading into 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of interesting stuff. I think a lot of this stuff is still coming out of the pandemic, and one of the biggest things is we're seeing the request for broader use provisions in commercial leases. So a broader use provision is going to allow you to do more stuff with your space. We're also seeing tenants seeking much more flexibility. We see these co-working and co-mingling spaces, and so people just want these unique sort of work environments, and so we're seeing a lot of that. We're getting a lot of marijuana dispensary questions, so that seems to be popular. Some other stuff that's more of a direct fallout from the pandemic, HVAC system upgrade requests. More flexibility in terms of distancing spaces and requirements to enter buildings. Of course, we're seeing people demanding now force majeure clauses because we now have some laws on that. The other interesting thing that we're seeing are these sort of pop-up leases, and they're these small, well, I shouldn't say they're small, but they're short-term leases to see if there's a market for what you want to do. And so, for instance, there'll be a pop-up little restaurant in a mall. And you go there, and the lease is 6 weeks, and they want to see how much foot traffic they get. So it's a tester lease.
Wow.
And so
is that something new?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, we've been asked to review these types of leases. I don't even know if they're true leases. I think they're almost licenses. But we've seen a lot of that in retail, or in some instances we would see them where somebody wants to lease a space to hold parties or to do those types of things. But we're now seeing it in the restaurants to see if there is kind of this proof of concept. So I think there'll be some trends towards that kind of flexibility, that unique sort of hybrid stuff. I just think that's where we're headed with a lot of stuff, particularly office and then some of the retail stuff.
Are there idiosyncrasies in the cannabis real estate sector that you have to deal with that you don't have to with other clients?
Oh, yeah, a lot of cash. That's primarily the question we get is, well, what do we do here? Do we pay the landlord, or the landlords ask, do we accept this money, or the property manager asks, do we accept cash? Can we accept cash? is this all we should be doing? You know, and so there's a little level of paranoia with both the tenants who are involved in this, the management companies who are involved in this, and the landlords. So absolutely a lot of idiosyncrasies in that arena.
Brandon, we talked a little bit about all the industrial projects going out in the far West Valley, but what are some of the implications that we're seeing from that growth when it comes to the legal aspect of the industrial growth we're seeing? Not just in the West Valley, but East Valley and even in the Central Corridor here, we're seeing a lot of industrial projects.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like I said, with this industrial growth, you're seeing a lot of development with retail space, multifamily housing, commercial office space, and the like. And with that, you're seeing a lot of contractual documents being drafted. And so if you're a transactional attorney right now, you really have your work cut out for you. So it really kind of underscores the necessity of having a good, skilled legal attorney to review these contracts beforehand, particularly in the construction law context. These contracts aren't your kind of typical contracts. They have very specific provisions in them dealing with how payments are going to be made, waivers of certifications of invoices, and there's pretty massive implications for the owners of these properties, the developers. So again, it's really important to kind of front load the legal work here to make sure that the parties are fully understanding what these contracts say, because we're seeing a lot of disputes arising over the interpretation of certain provisions, how those provisions might be read in light of certain developing circumstances and the like. So pretty interesting stuff in terms of the legal implications of the contractual provisions of these documents.
You know, I talked to a lot of people in the construction industry, and they're still facing issues with like supply chain and labor force. Does any of that factor into some of the legal issues that they can face? I mean, if they guarantee the delivery of the project by a certain time, how does that impact the legal aspect of the project?
Yes, so it's really important to read these documents, these contracts in light of these circumstances, because these contracts are going to determine the outcome. So they're going to say, for example, who's responsible for delays, and specifically in the context of the supply chain constrictions that we've seen in the last year, and the really low supply of labor and materials. It's going to specify who's responsible for those kind of delays, what the delays even are, whether or not they're excusable, non-excusable, and that kind of thing. And those delays can have real implications for the business owners.
Patrick, we talked about a lot of different things that's happening in the lease space. Are there ways that business owners can protect themselves in light of some of these trends that we're dealing with heading into 2023?
Yeah, certainly. I think it's understanding the documents that you're signing. That's kind of what Brandon was getting at. Getting appropriate assistance, whether that's through a broker who can tell you what truly is market. I can't tell you how many times people try to go it alone. How many times they think they know exactly what they should be doing or should be signing, and those are the ones that we end up litigating or having to kind of really spend a lot of money on in revising. And so dealing with a good broker, for sure, whether you're a landlord or a tenant, they're going to tell you what is market, what is typical for something like this, what the build-out time is going to take, what you're really doing and what you should expect. And then, of course, dealing with a good attorney, same thing. They're going to tell you what is market for these legal provisions. Understanding the law now. The law has changed a little bit. We have some clarification on force majeure. We have some clarification on what courts are willing to do in terms of interpreting contracts. So understanding the law, getting appropriate assistance, getting stuff in writing, particularly on what happens if there's a timeliness issue. What are my true remedies? Making sure that I get the remedies that I expected to get, making sure those are documented. And then going back to basics on some stuff. Have a term sheet, have an LOI. That makes my job much easier. That's going to make everything much smoother. And don't just sign a lease assuming you have no leverage. Many times a client will come to us and say, "Hey, I've signed this lease agreement that obligates me for the next 10 or 15 years. Can you review it?" And I said, "Well, you just signed it." And they don't understand that they really can't. There's nothing I can do at that point.
Right.
And so there is leverage that you have. Many tenants believe they have no leverage if they're a smaller player in a shopping plaza or whatever it may be, but they actually do. And there are certain things that they can do to protect themselves by, talking to somebody who can tell them what is or what is not market.
Are there any mistakes that you guys just see people make over and over again when it comes to the legal aspect of protecting themselves in the real estate industry?
I would say failure to incorporate, failure to set up an LLC to protect, to segregate your personal assets from your business assets. That's a big one. And anytime I see somebody signing a lease in their personal capacity, whether they're tenant or landlord, I'm shocked. Not getting the appropriate assistance on the front end is a big one that we see as well. It's much easier to, what do they say, pound a cure, or what, I forgot how that went. It was an ounce of prevention, whatever it is. That holds so true in the legal world. So doing the things on the front end to protect yourself, getting that LOI, making sure you understand your obligations, making sure you understand the lease or the purchase and sale agreement, or even the CC&Rs that govern the shopping mall or the plaza. You really have to do your due diligence. And that is where we see a lot of people saying, I just didn't do it. I didn't understand it. I didn't have anybody helping me.
And is it too late at that point?
There's certain things we can do. There's certain interpretations that we'll have to stretch and say and argue and position them for, but it is largely too late.
Okay, so Brandon, Arizona Commerce Authority, GPEC, they've had great success getting companies to move here. We're seeing a lot of companies come in with new industrial space. What's the one thing that people moving into this area need to know when it comes to the legal aspect of building a new industrial project or leasing a new industrial project or refurbishing a new an existing industrial project? What's the one thing they need to know legally to protect themselves?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, and you're only limited by the imagination. The one thing that I want to kind of echo back to is to make sure that these contractual documents are well understood. And the one thing that we're kind of seeing, and something that's kind of flying under the radar, is workmanship issues. So with the supply kind of constraint, contractors were having delays. And delays, if you're coming to Arizona as a new business, you're really trying to get in, you're trying to establish your footing, your roots. But if you're delayed with being able to move into your property, there's certainly going to be certain implications. So you want to make sure that contract doesn't have implications with respect to liquidated damages, limitations of liability clauses and that kind of thing. But something that I also think is kind of flying under the radar with respect to the workmanship issues is, when these contractors are coming in, sometimes, and this isn't always the case, but sometimes the workmanship issues are a little bit lower than the standard that we might have seen 3-4 years ago. Maybe they're outsourcing materials, using certain materials that are more readily available, but to a lower standard. And even though you might be able to move in right now, there might be workmanship issues that might interrupt your business. So you need to make sure that you understand under that contract what kind of rights you're going to have in terms of going to seek after the contractors for remedies.
Okay, great. Okay, we're almost out of time, but I have to just ask you before we go, what's the one thing people need to watch out for in terms of protecting themselves legally in the real estate industry in 2023 and beyond, Patrick?
All I'm going to say is go back to basics, read the document before you sign it, understand the document before you sign it, consider getting some assistance before you sign it.
Okay, Brandon,
back to basics.
One thing that people need to remember in 2023 and beyond.
Same deal, read the contract, make sure it's understood, make sure that you're not signing something that you don't understand, and specifically personal guarantees.
Okay, so Patrick, how do people get in touch with you now at Medalist Legal?
Sure, it's just P. MacQueen, PMACQUEEN at medalistlegal.com. My telephone number is 602-767-0050.
Okay, great. And Brandon, how do people get in touch with you?
Same thing. My email is bbodea at medalistlegal.com, 602-767-0045.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for being here with the Real Estate Pulse with Medalist Legal. Patrick, thank you for being here. Brandon, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Talk to these guys. Get their help.